Hello and welcome to the Friday, December 4th, 2020 edition of On Iowa Politics. This week, an Iowa race goes to Washington, water quality, and a capital idea. Hi, I'm James Lynch of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And with me today are Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, James.
Amie Rivers of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. Good morning, Amie.
Good morning, James.
Erin Murphy, Lee Newspapers Statehouse Bureau Chief. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning, James.
And Gazette columnist Todd Dorman. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
You can find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to On Iowa Politics on iTunes and Stitcher. First up this morning, in the never-ending saga of the 2nd District congressional race, Iowa election officials have certified Republican Marionette Miller Meeks as the winner in that open seat race, but Democrat Rita Hart didn't agree. However, rather than look to Iowa courts for a decision in her favor, Hart is asking the Democratic-controlled U.S. House to review the election results. Tom, I think we were all expecting Hart to challenge or contest the certification, but petitioning Nancy Pelosi rather than Iowa courts was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it? And what happens now?
Yeah, it definitely was a surprise. I, along with others who have closely followed this race and the recount process, were anticipating that Rita Hart would take this to court first, argue her case, and then appeal to the U.S. House of Representatives as the final arbiter, depending on how things played out in court. Just a bit of a background. Hart had until Wednesday afternoon to contest the state certified results in state court. That would have thrown the race to a 5-member judicial tribunal presided over by the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court. And that panel would have been required to rule on who won the seat by December 8th per state law. Hart's campaign argued that tight timeline for a state election challenge in the courts would not have allowed adequate time to examine the ballots and evidence needed to, quote, ensure all Iowans' votes are accurately counted in this historically close election. So the campaign claims that time constraints and a lack of standard rules prevented all votes from being counted during that district-wide recount. Iowa law prohibits ballots not counted in the initial canvass of votes from being considered in a recount. And as a result, Rita Hart's campaign alleges that there are legally cast ballots, including ballots cast by military members serving overseas, that were not included in that initial canvass and thus couldn't be included in the recount. The campaign too contends that many counties did not fully review ballots to identify valid votes that the machines did not recognize during the recount, in part because of the time and the burden that would have been required to do such a thorough recount. And so her campaign is arguing that there are thousands of overvotes and undervotes in the race that were not examined for voter intent because there were just the time constraints in doing such a thorough hand recount. As for what happens now, Rita Hart would need to file a petition within 30 days of Monday's state certification of the election. Doing that would trigger a proceeding in front of the House Committee on Administration that would allow the campaign to offer testimony and evidence in such a proceeding. Either party may take sworn depositions, subpoena witnesses, produce documents, and file briefs to include any materials that they wish to put on the record before the committee. The U.S. House could also direct the committee to conduct its own investigation and recount, a process that in the past has included reviewing election records and examining disputed ballots. As well, the House Committee could interview and examine various election personnel in the state. The committee would then submit a report of its findings to the full House with a recommendation on which candidate should fill the vacancy, which could require a simple majority vote of the U.S. House, or they could find that neither party is entitled to fill the seat and declare a vacancy. So the last time this happened, it's worth noting that the last time this happened in 1984 in Indiana's 8th congressional district, the democratically controlled House did its own recount and voted to seat Democratic incumbent Frank McCloskey. That move nullified the state's certification of his Republican challenger as the winner.
So this could go on for quite a while, it sounds like.
Yes, and it was not immediately clear to me on Wednesday whether or not that process would hold up Marionette Miller Meeks from being sworn in on January 3rd. Still, I guess, don't have a clear answer on that, and I guess how that would impact that as things play out, or if she would, still be sworn in. I guess depending on what the House decides.
Okay. So the second district could have a representative there, or maybe no representative until this is resolved.
That was not immediately clear to me on Wednesday. Still haven't gotten a definitive answer on that, so I'm not really sure.
Thanks, Tom. Aaron, we've heard several Republicans chastising Hart for not accepting the results of the 24 county recounts, and Iowa Democrats are defending her decision to appeal to the U.S. House. What's the gist of their arguments, or is it just strictly partisan politics?
I feel like you're setting me up here, James, with that question.
I do my best.
Of course, it's strictly partisan politics. Look, and both sides have fairly strong partisan cases to make here. This is, I mean, it's not unprecedented, as Tom just noted, but it's pretty dang rare, and this is largely uncharted waters here. So we're reaching steps in the process that are very rarely employed. I think Tom laid out the case pretty clearly for why Democrats feel they needed to go the route they did. And, it's not hard to understand Republicans' arguments either that, if the Hart campaign really wanted to challenge this, they could have done it at the state level, and they instead waited to go to the House, which is controlled by their political party. So yeah, I mean, but both sides have their arguments that they're going to make based on a case that's going to be most helpful to them, to their party. What's also interesting to me is that the kind of the expansion of criticism from Republicans here, and shameful plug, as I'll every once in a while do here. You may see some words about this in print over the weekend with my name at the top. We've spent weeks and still haven't heard U.S. Senators, Iowa's Republican U.S. Senators Chuck Grassley or Joni Ernst admit that Joe Biden won the presidential election that was literally a month ago. And yet within 2 hours of the Iowa 2nd District race being called and Hart announcing its challenge, they jumped all over that one to say that Democrats should respect the outcome of that election and move on. So I think it's fair to observe a little bit of inconsistency there in how some Republicans are viewing election results this cycle.
Yeah, and Todd, I was going to ask you about that. That the blowback from Republicans is saying that this Iowa election should not be determined by Washington politicians. One blogger on the conservative side of the spectrum called it legal but shady when he was writing about Hart's her challenge or her petition to the House. But isn't there a lot of irony here in Republicans calling for a Democratic candidate to accept the election outcome and Democrats refusing to accept what appears to be the election outcome?
Yeah, I mean, there's irony running both ways. I mean, Republicans say this is settled and they don't want further proceedings, but with the presidency in the balance, they're claiming that's not settled. And Democrats, are bashing Republicans for not accepting Joe Biden's victory, and at the same time, they're, obviously pursuing this unique route to try to get Rita Hart a House seat. I mean, I think Republicans have a point when they criticize this process. Although I would bet the farm that if this were reversed and the Republicans controlled the House, that they would be doing the exact same thing. And I mean, we've seen sort of with the state House race last year in Northeast Iowa, where the the ballots weren't opened and there were the wrong barcodes or whatnot. And now with this, I mean, Republicans kind of seem to be displaying an idea that, hey, once we're ahead, let's not worry about whether there are any other legal votes to count, because that just might mess everything up. So, I mean, if the only way I think this House process, goes from being shady to enlightening is if there are legally cast votes that weren't counted for some reason, and really those votes should be counted if they were legally cast. So that's, I hope that I also hope this is a transparent process, because it's going to get even more shady if they just sort of make pronouncements and rulings and arguments without explaining what they're doing. That can really contribute to the idea that this is nothing more than a partisan grab of a House seat.
Yeah, it seems like it would be really ironic too if military ballots that weren't counted changed the outcome here, considering that Miller Meeks is like a
Yeah,
24-year veteran, Army veteran. Um, yeah, and it would be ironic if those votes weren't counted too, I guess, uh,
yeah.
in that case. So, um, speaking of election outcomes, Amy, there were news reports earlier this week that First District Representative Abby Finkenauer is among a handful of people President-elect Joe Biden is considering for Secretary of Labor.
Mm.
Given their relationship going back to the 2008 Iowa caucus campaign, it doesn't seem surprising that Biden would find a job for Finkenauer, does it? But cabinet position seems to be a big step for a one-term congresswoman.
Yeah, it would be. And I was talking with Erin about this actually this week. And he, because I was saying it's not surprising that the offer would at least be there, whether it's, a real offer or not. I think, she was an early and very vocal backer of his campaign. Back during the Iowa caucuses when she could have, hitched her horse to anybody. And Erin pointed out that she was also, on his side back in 2008 and wanted to, support him then. So she's a longtime backer of Biden. I think, that tends to get rewarded in most administrations. So I think whether she ends up getting Secretary of Labor, though, is a little bit up in the air. I think Erin wrote a really nice piece on it, just talking about, it's maybe not super likely, but we're not really sure if it's likely, just because she's like you said, a one-term congresswoman, probably doesn't have that experience that some of the other nominees that were floated do. But nevertheless, there could be other qualities that he's looking for, and perhaps he's floating her name then to, give her a second place prize of another position in his cabinet. So I think either way it shakes out, you will probably see Finkenauer in Washington or working for Biden in some respects.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising at all. What is honesty pays, but loyalty pays off, or something.
There
I
you
think that's
go.
what I'm saying. Yeah, uh,
That's right.
and we're as we put the election in the rearview mirror, or at least try to. We're setting the stage for the coming legislative session, which opens in January. And Governor Kim Reynolds has said that she will make another effort to get the legislature to pass her Invest in Iowa plan that would provide funding for water quality and outdoor recreation, as well as other priorities, by raising the sales tax. Todd, do you think that a report out this week that 45% of Iowa's waters are impaired will help build a fire under the GOP-controlled legislature to take action, or will they just keep posting no swimming signs?
Yeah, I would bet on the no swimming signs. The governor's plan is a net tax reduction, with a sales tax increase and an income tax cut. But I mean, raising the sales tax in a pandemic economy is not going to look very attractive to lawmakers, I don't think. And with revenues not great, I don't know that an income tax cut is going to be the prudent thing to do. They may have trouble sort of holding the line on a kind of a status quo or below status quo budget. So, there was not a lot of enthusiasm among lawmakers for her plan last year, and conditions seem even less, less conducive to passing something big and complicated like that this year with so much uncertainty. I mean, that said, governors sometimes, can exert some pressure to get their priorities, but if Reynolds were the sort of governor who has in the past said, I want my priority, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take down some of yours, I might think, well, she's got a chance, but she's never really displayed a willingness to do that and play hardball with her own party. So I have a feeling this is going to be bounced around a little bit. Lawmakers will talk about how they're interested and they're looking at it, and then in the end, it's probably going to have to wait. But that's just what it looks like from at this point, today.
Yeah, and I mean the comments that Representative Lee Hine, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, made yesterday or Thursday at the Iowa Taxpayers Association meeting weren't real encouraging in terms of a tax cut. He kept saying, we might want to wait and see how things shake out here, uh, after the pandemic, and see what revenues are before we pass a tax cut, because we don't, I think his words were, we don't want to get behind the eight ball. And the legislature has been in that position in the past, back in what was it, like 2017 and 18, when they had to go in and deappropriate. And I don't think they want to have to do that again. So it's
Yeah,
probably going to be a tough sell for the governor to get
yeah,
by.
and we have no idea at this point what the pandemic is going to look like in a month or 2 months. I mean, there are experts saying it's going to, we're going to see more spikes in cases and hospitalizations as we go through the winter months, and the economic impact of that, it's not going to be good. So, I mean, things might, as bad as things sort of look today, they might look even worse come January. I guess they'll get a revenue estimate soon. Is that next week? I don't know. Yeah, which they're supposed to base their budget on, but I doubt it's going to be super positive. It might not be as bad as feared, but I mean, yeah, there's just so much uncertainty. It's hard to pass a big, ambitious plan with so many moving parts.
Right, and the Iowa Legislative Services Agency is saying that the revenue numbers don't really show the full picture,
Yeah,
because the tax filing deadlines were pushed back because of the pandemic. So they can't do an apples to apples comparison with last year. You know, the revenue numbers look pretty good compared to last year, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. So
right.
there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I guess that's certainly one we'll say stay tuned.
Yeah, Jim, if I can just tack one little
Sure.
thought onto this, the other thing to keep in mind with all this is this was a tall order, a big ask in a normal session, in a
Oh
normal
yeah,
year.
Right, right.
It's just such it's ambitious. There's a lot of pieces within it that a lot of people like, but when you put the whole thing together, so many moving parts, so many big things, that it was going to be a tall ask. Like I said, in a normal year, you throw in the uncertainty of the pandemic, and it's just really hard to see it getting done.
well, and it had barely moved by mid-March when the legislature skedaddled for the
Exactly.
pandemic. I think there'd been one subcommittee meeting, and I
Yep.
mean, there's a lot of moving parts, which also means that there's stuff in there for everyone to dislike. I mean, there's there were pieces that environmental groups didn't like. There were pieces that taxpayer groups didn't like, and there was never any real confirmation as to what it was going to mean for mental health, whether it was going to be an increase in funding or whether it was just going to be property tax replacement. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Aaron's completely right. I mean, it was having problems before all this happened.
Moving on here. I've covered the legislature for a few years, and in that time, I've seen a change in the relationship between reporters at the State House. There always has been a camaraderie among reporters. However, the media landscape, changes in ownership, downsizing of news staffs, and new media has resulted in a movement away from the folks jealously guarding their turf to more sharing and cooperation between news organizations. This podcast, for example, is the result of a sharing agreement between the Gazette and Lee newspapers that goes back at least 10 years. Now, State House reporters have taken the cooperation a step further with the creation of the Iowa Capitol Press Association. Erin, or should I call you President Murphy? Uh, Tell us more about that.
Well, not yet. We're still counting some ballots in some precincts. And, some of the sure. Yeah, so I'm really happy to see this moving. It's actually an idea that's been kicked around by myself and others in the State House Press Corps for literally a few years. Even had early organizational meetings a little while back, and as things tend to happen, it gets put on the back burner and lost track of, and we were able to kind of rekindle that earlier this year. We were able to really keep the ball rolling, and this time we got to the point where we are officially a thing, I guess. Announced ourselves here recently. We elected officers, myself, Kathy Obradovich of the Iowa Capitol Dispatch, and Katerina Sester from Iowa Public Radio. And basically the goal, the first thing I always say to make it as simple as explanation as possible for people who are familiar with the White House Correspondents Association, we're basically that, but for the Iowa Capitol. Just a group of reporters who cover the State House, the governor, state government, essentially, and wanted the ability to have an organization that can speak with one voice on behalf of us all on any issues related to whether it's access or transparency, those kinds of issues, or even just something as simple as working conditions at the Capitol. It just gives us that opportunity to speak with one collective voice on matters that we feel are important. And this isn't even necessarily some big aggressive thing. I mean, one of the first things we're going to want to set out to do is just kind of talk to the governor's office about what press conferences look like in the coming weeks and months. Talk to the legislative leaders about what the legislative session is going to look like during the pandemic, what safety precautions are being taken, just the kind of stuff that impacts us as a group and how we do our work and how we get the information that gets into our stories and out to our readers and listeners and viewers. So I think it's a group that can do some good things that'll hopefully make work a little bit better for State House journalists, which then we don't do for selfish reasons. We do that because the better our working conditions, the better we can do our job for the people of Iowa.
So, Erin, you said this is sort of like the White House reporters group. So you're going to throw a big dinner sometime during the year and poke fun at the governor and the elected officials?
God, no, not as long as I'm president. Anyways, I can make that campaign pledge right now. This isn't George Bush saying no new taxes either. They will not be at Iowa Press Association Correspondents' Dinner.
So, does your association accept podcasters as members?
We'll have to have that discussion, James. I will put that on the agenda for the next meeting, and thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Oh, of course. Well, that's it for this edition of On Iowa Politics. I hope it was worth your time. If you liked it, tell a friend and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you find your podcast. Send fan mail to podcasts@thegazette.com. And you can find us on the homepages of the Quad City Times, Sioux City Journal, Muscatine Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Item 9 and the Mad Hatters will take us out. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be on our show, send us a sound file and remember to subscribe to On Iowa Politics. For Amie, Tom, Erin, Todd, and our producer, Stephen, I'm James Lynch. Thanks for listening. Stay well.
like a girl who was dirty and sleazy. I walked up to you and I asked you to dance. Little did I know you are the master of trance. Now you're eating on my food and you're banning my friends from coming to see me when I get the bands. Oh, no. There was one reason I approached you in the first place. I just wanted someone to suck on my face. But you treat me right up and took my soul with precision, provoking me the right to even make a decision. Took a sharp blade and cut right in my head. You switched a few wires, now I might be brain dead. Oh no. Your arguments are shit, but they're getting awful stronger. I can't take your drama for too awful longer. The things I said about you, oh, it wasn't a myth. You mess up every other boy you've ever been with. I'm putting on my string into breaking these chains. Oh, run away now and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, little girl. I don't wanna see your face hanging round my door. Ooh, that's right.